Welcome to Ijeruka's Restoring Afrofemininity Roundtable as part of our upcoming course on African descendant women and social change. It's a pleasure to have you listening, and it's really an honor to be joined by Julia Ribeiro and Doriana Diaz, two teachers in our upcoming course. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to this conversation. So just to give you a little bit of insight, Julia is part of the Kukili Afrofeminist Artistic Collective, which is composed of Colleen Fitzgerald, Jasmine Sanchez, and Lena Lasso as well, four artists from the African diaspora with origins in Argentina, Brazil, and the United States. They work interdisciplinarily in performance installations, audio visuals, and cultural production. And their work covers themes such as Afro-diasporic identities, self-representation, memory, ancestral knowledge, and envisioning Black futures. And Doriana Diaz is a multidimensional artist, archivist, and memory worker rooted in Philadelphia's soulful rhythms. Her work explores loss, memory, fantasy, utopia, formation, and identity through archival documentations of visual imagery, and also explores cultural agency and the rhythms of resistance and expansion. Restoring Women and Social Change is really about unpacking, unraveling, and retelling the multifaceted narratives of African descendant people, and especially women of African descent, and our revolutionary contributions to broader global transformations, communal transformations, and critical discourses. The course is going to explore some of our timeless philosophies, Afrofeminist principles, and global Black feminisms across the world. But also, it's going to challenge us to rethink the ways that we've historically been told that women of African descent in particular, our place in society, the ways that we've shown up. And yeah, so I'm super excited, Julia, actually, because you are a teacher in our very first session in the opening ceremony. You and the Kukili Afrofeminist Arts Collective have come up with Awakening the Future as the theme for our first session. So I thought it would be great to start there, as women of African descent, and in general, actually just Black people globally, are not typically seen as architects of change, as builders of the future. We're usually seen as passive recipients of change. Can you talk a little bit about how your work presents and represents the boundless possibilities for our future, and the role that women of African descent play in shaping that? Like, what does it mean to actually awaken the future and to center African descendant women in our thinking about the future?
I feel like it is what goes through and across all the work we do with Kukle. So as you said, I'm part of this collective, which I think really shapes who I am and also how I'm talking today. I think myself as a part of a collective, and I feel like in that way that is thinking of the future, I'm building with others. I feel like that is what we have been doing since 2016, 17, when we started working together and really understanding our identity, as a collective identity at first, as individual Black Afro-descendant women. The individual and the collective, they nurture each other all the time, right? So I feel like that is the first thing, saying and presenting myself as part of this collective, and just putting ourselves in the place of, as Black women, thinking of the future. That is revolutionary in itself, right? As you said, we are not thought as subjects of the future, we are not thought as subjects of the present, right? In many cases, we are the objects. So just changing that position and started to see how our ancestral memory that we still are, like the course says, restoring, we can restore and create at the same time. And I think that is the power we have. That is the resilience. Like I was thinking about this word restoration, right? And what it means as Black Afro-descendant women. And I feel like restoration means healing. It means hurting at some points, but in the same process, researching as well. And I was looking at Doriana's work with archive and collage, and I was like, yeah, that is research, that is rewriting history, that is restoring, that is connecting the voids, right? I feel as, especially as Afro-diasporic women of the Americas, we have so many voids because of the violence and the symbolic violence that was the slave trade, and how we lack so many things of our memory and our history. And I feel finding the ways to reconnect and fill the voids, it's healing and it's creating new languages, new resources, new tools at the same time. So we are already creating tools for the future in the unavoidable path that we have to do to have a full identity, to restore our memory. So I feel like we don't realize many times that we are doing this work, right? We are doing all this work and we are creating tools for the future. We are creating language. We are creating the base so the Black women of the future will do more. I feel like what we are doing now is reconnecting and creating these languages of resilience and reconnection. So I feel like more times that we realize we are creating future without even knowing, right? And I feel in that sense, art is so critical, is so radical, right? Because it's given us the tools and the environment to create as we heal and to create new language, to create the language of our self-representation. I feel like also we've been talked about in a language that wasn't ours, right? We are creating this language and we are restoring the language of our ancestrals, right? We have lost so much, but in the action of trying to recover that, we are creating new things.
Yeah, you articulated that so beautifully. I think this title of the course being Restorying, which a lot of people read as restoring, and it's meant to be read that way in the sense that, exactly as you said, we are restoring and reclaiming and reconnecting, excavating these histories, finding what has been lost or hidden. And at the same time, we are in the process of creating anew, of reclaiming ourselves and discovering new aspects to who we are individually and collectively, and figuring out ways to represent that. And that it's such an interesting journey to be to go on as individuals. And I think like we'll talk a little bit more about our own individual experiences and how that informs where we're at now and how we come into our practice. But I think there is this beauty, and sometimes we can get worn down or worn out and even despondent, thinking about how much has been lost, how much other people's voices or representations of our narratives and experiences have overpowered and overwhelmed our true kind of expressions. But what it means to have to go on that quest to restore, as you said, we don't have to have it all figured out in terms of knowing exactly what we're building. And awakening the future doesn't mean having this grand master plan for how we fix absolutely everything, because in the act of exploration, we are already creating the future. And so it's more that kind of awareness and coming into full awareness of the fact that we have this agency. And we talked about this a little bit in our last conversation, Doriana, about the importance of agency and recognizing our agency. So I love that you bring that back in the beginning of this discussion, Julia. I actually wanted to pass to you, Doriana, if you want to reflect on this question, but also to think about this intersection between the future and the past, because your work as a memory worker, as an archivist, you are directly involved in excavating these stories. And so, yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on how you think about the importance of restoring in that sense. Yeah. And what restore.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to thank both of you. As I really identify so much, Julia, with what you were saying around recreating language and just the individual and the collective and all of that. I think about a lot of that a lot of the time, honestly, because I do create a lot in isolation and then I present it to the world. And that's always a really interesting experience. We're going from really being in a space where you're really alone with your research and your practice, and then you invite individuals into that experience. And so I think a lot about restoring. I think a lot about preservation as an archivist. And I think preservation and restoration are very interesting things. I try to lean more towards restoration than preservation. I think it's important to preserve certain things of our history, but I also think that we really need to be thinking critically about the future, and restoration seems more of a term and a word that really opens up the possibility of that side of the experience. And so I really appreciate bringing that word into this conversation. And also just thinking a lot about really taking things from the past and meditating on them, sitting with them, allowing them to be, images of your life, images that you sit with or material that you're sitting with, and then figuring out how to redetermine it and put it into something that can exist in the present moment and beyond your time on this planet. And I think that's something that's a really interesting and also really fragile kind of practice for me. I know I spoke a lot about this, in the Instagram live, and I think that in that way it is really something that is, for me, a very spiritual practice, and one that I do think needs to be handled with a lot of delicacy. And so I think in that ways, that's a lot of what I've been meditating on, is what does that look like? How does that feel? How do I engage with that material? How does this material also live beyond me? Because I think it is really crucial. Like, we can't talk about trauma without talking about healing. And so I think that in terms of the kind of things that can exist simultaneously, and understanding that we are like multifaceted, nuanced, and complex people as individuals, and then that being of service to our community and allowing us to see one another in a real, honest, and truthful way. And then bringing art into that, I think, is absolutely critical, because then that's how continue to learn about yourself and continue to recreate yourself, recreate your collective, or reimagine the idea of liberation and how we walk towards freedom together.
Yeah.
And I think that is, I guess, where my answer lies.
I think but something that you both mentioned is the focus on self, and even in like your discussion of archives and archival work, you're thinking about it in relation to yourself. And so I wanted to just delve in there a little bit, because this is a multifaceted course in the sense that we are looking at larger sort of socio-cultural, historical, even psychological and mythic factors that have influenced the ways that we understand Afro-descendant women and our contributions and place in society, our expressions. But a big part of that as well is really a deep kind of introspective look at ourselves. And so I wanted to, pass back to you again. And maybe we start with Julia and just share a bit more about your own journey into, one, understanding yourself as a Black woman, as a woman of African descent, and what that means, and how it relates to your work with Kukli. And then, and then Doriana, same for you. I think it's so important because, and I'll share a little bit about myself as well. I have always found it so interesting and at times confusing seeing how I'm Nigerian. I've grown up all over the place, but my world is filled with Black women, with African women. Growing up, my mom actually she has 7 sisters, and she had this women's group that was just hundreds and hundreds of women from all around the world, all of African descent, supporting each other, taking back their lives. A lot of them were women who had children, had been wives, and worked and had all these careers, and were discovering themselves again for the first time, and doing that in support or in community with other women. And so I got to watch that, like, growing up and be a part of it. And it was really beautiful to just see how powerful they were, how empowered they were. But at the same time, there's this kind of like contradiction in the sense that I see women around me being leaders, being the shapers of our society, and having such strong identities, and at the same time existing within this sort of patriarchal system where a lot of our power is somehow like co-opted, and also just not even represented in any of the books that I'm reading, really, especially when it comes to like things that I was learning in school. I can barely remember. Actually, I don't think I do remember, because I at one point I went to school in the UK and I didn't learn anything that had to do with Black women, nothing at all. And so I had to seek that out myself. And even being in like university and gender studies, a lot of the gender studies professors as well, I would ask them and they didn't read Black feminist work. How can you be a gender studies professor and yet ignore an entire body of work from Black women? How does that make sense? There's all these kind of gaps and erasures. And I've been trying to understand myself in relation to them. And part of that journey has led me to creating this platform. But I'm interested in your own individual experiences as well and how it relates to your work.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I feel hearing about different experiences of Black women, like it makes me feel expanded as well. And I feel like, different from you, I didn't grow up with a lot of that representation of power in Black women. So I'm half Brazilian, half Argentinian. I was born in Brazil, and I have a Black father and a white mother. And I feel like my oldest and closest representation of Black women is my grandma. And I feel like my two grandmas have become very important figures and like guidance in my life. And I feel like I'm restoring my grandma because we knew we were like a Black family, that part of the family, but it was not talked about. And that is also a void, a gap I feel like many people from my generation have. I didn't have the opportunity to talk with my grandma about Blackness. So I feel like I have to talk to her now in my imagination, right? And I have to have these conversations, and I'm comprehending her more in different ways now that I had this journey building my identity and restoring my memory. So I feel like now I can imagine her as a Black girl into her childhood, or as a Black woman, as a Black mother.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up with that. And then when I was 11 years old, I moved to Argentina, right? And that also shaped my identity in many ways. I feel like even though Argentina is a country that denies their Black culture, legacy, presence, and history, here is where I really built my Black identity. And it was through other people, through other Black people. And I feel like this concept or this image of Black people being mirrors to each other is like so strong in my life, because I feel like I needed those mirrors to really see myself through a Black lens, right? And it happened through social movements, right? It happened through being active in the feminist movement, and that leading me to find the Afro-Argentine movement and meeting with the first Black people from Argentina that I met, right, in that context. And it was one of these like feminist gatherings that there is here. There are massive events that happen once a year in Argentina. I was there, and in 2016, it was the first time that inside these gatherings there was a space for Black women. So Black women also had to fight a lot inside the feminist movement to have their own space here. And it's there where I met Colleen, Lena, and Jasmine, right? And we all recognize each other as Afro-descendant women and artists, and from different disciplines, right? But we started talking about the experience of being Afro-descendant as Afro-diasporic people, right? And also here in Argentina, with living as a Black person in a country that denies our existence, right? So we started talking about that, and trying to create ways to create, as we were saying, a language of self-representation here in this territory. So that is how my personal history connects to our work. I feel like we needed to find each other to really be our full selves here. And also as artists, the art world is so white, And here in Argentina, you can really feel that as Black artists. I feel like they still see us as something kind of fetishes or exotic, even inside the art world. So I feel like we are creating a Black language from here, from this South America, Latin America, from Argentina, from a point of view. I feel like we have different origins inside the collective, and I feel like what we do is see the points of connection, even though we come from different places. Being an Afro-descendant woman makes us go through very similar experiences, and that is what we grab to create this collective language, right? So we've been working a lot with the memory of this country and they represent or not represent Black women, and how we can like say something about it and intervene that. And we have been working with community a lot. In every piece of art we do, there's many voices, and we create formats so we can include other people that maybe not artists, just people from our community, because we need these mirrors to feel like we are a whole person and heal in that way with others. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I also love the sort of expressing, being mirrors of each other and actually coming into sort of a fullness of identity through other Black people. And I think that's definitely been the case for me. And even at times where I was in predominantly white spaces and the only Black person there, the only African person there, I have been able to find those mirrors or find those representations through art, through literature, through many other different forms. And it just reinforces the importance of these different expressions. Yeah, thank you for sharing your own kind of journey with Kukli and how you guys came together. Doriana, what about you? What is your kind of experience?
I often feel very confused about myself. And I think that's actually really exciting. I am a person of multiple, and I think that I'm really learning to make peace with that. I think I grew up in very white spaces and often felt very objectified and disposable and ugly. And I became very naturalized to the erasure of people that look like me. And I think I was very much asleep for a very long time and was just trying to survive, trying to find a way where I could fit in and be very quiet and be unseen. And never stood up really for myself when I was insulted or just disrespected. And I spent a long time in that place, and I think I was really okay with victimizing myself. And then I, at some point, found art really young, and it really saved my life and has saved my life multiple times since then. I found the words of Sonia Sanchez, of Butler. I was listening to the Supremes, Quincy Jones. I was just like relishing in the Black art, and I really became awake and curious. I just became so curious and so fascinated. And I identify as Afro-Latina, so it was not just in Black spaces, but I was learning more about Puerto Rican culture and investing in language. And I became so curious. And I think the curiosity is also what saved me, is that I really tried to live a curious life. And that allows me to relinquish judgment of anybody, honestly, of judgment around myself and judgment around what happens in my environment or my surroundings that is out of my control. it also helps me to release that heavy burden and weight of the destruction that has been done against Black people in this country, which can kill you if you spend time in that space. I think it's important to spend time in that space, but not too much time, because it can get really dark. And I think that I just want to have a nice day. And I think that I'm deserving of that. And I want to feel safe with myself. And so I think it has really transcended my practice. And I think curiosity it means everything to me. And it just opens you up to the possibility and the truth of the matter, which is everybody has an infinite capacity to love. Really helps me to embrace the softness and the tenderness of who I am, the sensitivity that comes with who I am, the desperation to be seen, to be understood, to live within a collective space where we're all just flourishing and putting growth into one another in a way that feels so good and gives you hope for the future. Because I think that, the relishing in the past and relishing in places where I don't feel loved is really the times where I have felt completely without agency and choice. And so I think that has really been the experience for me. And art is just the most crucial element of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that you said. And I think you really spoke to this. I think something that happens when we do get really honest with ourselves, which is really wanting to be seen and to be desired and all these things. And I know that, again, there are these broader systemic structural factors that affect our lives, but that space for introspection can allow us to see those desires, to see some of those things that make us feel unloved, unwanted, undesirable, and even at times powerless as well. It's not just important to excavate our histories, but to excavate the understandings of ourselves as well, and to be able to lay it bare and to be vulnerable with ourselves and with others. And I really appreciate you for sharing that point that Julia made about mirrors, and ask you if we are mirrors of each other. What is it that you see in the mirror today when you think about or look at the landscape for African descendant women? What do you see? What is staring at us in the mirror? Good and bad, the good, bad, ugly, everything. Let's be vulnerable.
I think in a lot of ways I see passion bursting at the seams, but I also see grievers attempting to make space for joy. And I think in some ways it being really difficult because we're falling back in old indoctrinated ideologies around how we're supposed to grieve and mourn. And we're not really considering the other side of it, or the possibility of really moving and being feelers of joy and really captivating that aspect. And that doesn't mean that you can't grieve and feel joy simultaneously. I do it all the time. It's 100% humanly possible. I think embracing the duality of feeling, or embracing our ability as human beings to feel multiple things at once, to be multiple, I think is a really beautiful thing that people are, I think, really attempting to lean into. But I would love to see more of that.
Yeah, completely agree. Julia, what about you?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is creativity. I feel very inspired by Black women. Creativity in pain, right? As Doriana was saying, feeling joy while grieving. And I feel like we also feel joy in joy, maybe joy in doing something with our pain, because there is a lot of trauma. I feel like we have trauma, and a lot of that is not going away, right? So we are doing something with it.
I was going to say that I feel like you both captured that duality, which is something that I think about a lot. And I think this actually applies to the global Black diaspora in general and to many people in this world, which is that we are creators, but we are creators who are grieving, who are in pain, who are working to heal. But I think doubly so for Afro-descendant women. And a big part of the reason why I created this course and called it Restoring Afrofemininity, and we're calling it Restoring Women and Social Change now, because that's, I think, a bit more encompassing of everything that the program explores. But the Afrofemininity in particular is because I don't know if you guys are as exposed to some of these conversations that happen in many kind of mainstream platforms, which is I see people reaching for something, seeking a fixed understanding that they can latch onto of who we should be as Afro-descendant women, what place we should have. And sometimes that is rooted in very harmful ideals and ideas, and especially in times of general kind of instability, people look to the thing that they know best. And what we have known, commonly known, because I think there's also a deeper knowing. There's, like we said, there's things that have been lost that are from our traditions of matriarchal rule to powerful women. There's all sorts of other histories that are known, but not necessarily known immediately. But in our mainstream understandings, people reach back into this is who we should be as Black women. This is what femininity should look like. This is what Black womanhood should look like. And I want to be told and schooled in that. And I think the restorying, because to write a story, first of all, like you said, it's a creative act. It calls on us to be agents, to be the storytellers ourselves. And it recognizes that we don't have fixed answers, that there are complex and many different, in a story, there's so many different ways that you can write it, right? There's so many different lanes that the characters can go down. And so it's also like having a compassion and empathy for that desire that I see to have definitive answers and to have stability in a world that is so rocky and changing right now. When we're in the midst of sort of multiple crises that people are contending with, and identity is one of those things. Role and place is another one of those things. We're seen as carrying society on our backs. And for women of African descent, whether we're talking about colonialism or we're talking about enslavement and civil rights, having to be pillars of our community, it at times has required us, or has pushed us into an understanding of ourselves as like, we cannot be the thing that is changing and the thing that is complex, or like you said, has multitudes, because we need to be able to hold people down, be the last kind of defense line. And so I think part of this reclamation and restoring is understanding that just like every other person in this world, we have a right to and need to learn how to embrace fluidity and learn how to embrace multitudes, and actually not really run from the responsibility of being agents of and architects of change, And that is something that's actually part of our heritage. And yeah, I'm just like fascinated when I see women like you two who are very clearly doing that in your own ways. And even through some of the complex experiences and traumatizing experiences as well, and having the erasure as a Argentinian or Brazilian woman may not necessarily have had a full kind of representation of your family's Black heritage growing up, than to going into a country that doesn't see or recognize you and ignores the fact that women like you exist, to Doriana being in predominantly white spaces and feeling yourself as not being worthy, not even being fully necessarily human on the same level. That's something that I can relate to as well. And yeah, it's just exciting to see that even in the midst of all of that, there is so much possibility. And we don't have to look very far. We don't even have to look too deep into history. We can just look at the women around us to see what is possible for us in terms of being architects of our own destinies, essentially, and leaders of our communities. Yeah, I really just wanted to pull that into the conversation, and we're coming close to the end point, but I wanted to see if there's anything else that you two want to share, or what are you excited about when it comes to this program?
Yeah, I think that what you are saying is very powerful, and connecting to our work with Kukle, what I connected was in this work we've been imagining Black futures, right? And we've been working with Afrofuturism, Afro-surrealism, and what we've been bringing to this building of the future is dreaming, like the space to dream. And I feel like it connects with what you were saying about not forgetting that we also need to, as Black women, have that space. And dreaming has not a goal, right? And you don't have to have an answer, like an exact answer. And you can dream your past, you can dream your present, you can dream your future. So I feel like, yeah, is one of the things that in our building of the future we think is essential. The dreaming. And I feel like you also need to, the more tools you have, maybe the more powerful your dream can get. And in that sense is what I expect from the course, and I'm excited about just hearing more Black women and exchanging tools. I feel like being together has that potential as well. We are all creating different languages, and we can share those languages with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julia. Doriana, any last words?
I would definitely piggyback off of that. I'm really excited to see women stepping in and taking agency of their own healing. And I also think, like, I hope people take away, similar to what I was saying around multitudes, but like releasing other people's expectations of who they think you should be, and really tapping into who you are and who you want to be and what is for yourself. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do in isolation, but also especially within a collective. I think having these conversations is such a crucial foundation to be able to tap into so many other elements, or start your own practice, or start going to therapy, or whatever it is for you, that this can be such a clear jumping off point for you to be able to really determine what outlets and spaces you want to be in to continue that healing process for yourself. And I'm just really excited to see where that can go for everybody who is coming.
Thank you both so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that everyone listening or watching this back feels the same way. I think you both are exceptional, brilliant, inspiring, wise, powerful women. And I'm just looking forward to watching your journeys unfold even beyond this course. And yeah, so I'm really grateful for you taking the time to be with me in conversation today.
Thank you so much.
It was so beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating this space.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so final words. Restoring Women and Social Change begins on April 9th. It's an 8-week intimate odyssey and exploring the revolutionary contributions of Afro-descendant women, our multifaceted narratives, and it's an opportunity to connect with other wise and wonderful women like Julia and Doriana. And I'm going to shout out myself as well. I will be facilitating the course along with 11 brilliant teachers. And find more information on it on our website, ijeruka.com. So I look forward to hopefully having some of you join us. All right.
Yay.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.